fatal heart impacts, past painful scars. In fact, I blast tasteful bars and pass. I back up my actions, fact don't ask, grab reactions, jacked attack with every word, then act with class as they hear me snap. I got nothing to lose, cause I fought and felt the bruise. Now I'm not the one confused, call the shots and they produce. I ain't lost, I'm finally loose. Pick a new silver excuse, I need the views to boost me to a new abuse of being used. Everybody wants a piece now, y'all can rest in peace now. You're dead to me, so peace out. Remember, you're discreet out. Get ready for defeat now.
Alrighty. Hello everybody. This is Kirusho here. And now, whenever we last left off, we had Izuku Midoriya. What has happened to him? Izuku Midoriya, whenever he was camping or at his home with his allies or family, you could call them, they were ambushed. An enemy raided in the middle of the night. Their camp was attacked and Midoriya was taken prisoner. Midoriya, after suffering from several cuts along his arms and his legs, along with some on his torso, he also broke his ribs and cracked a few of them, before he was taken prisoner and beaten more whenever he tried to escape. Someone taking a whip to his back, along with having his right hand, his sword hand, hit over and over again in his palm with a boot. The man believed that he broke Midoriya's hand. However, that is quite contrary to it. What he really did was he, cracked a whole lot of the bones, along with caused a lot of swelling and trauma to his hand. Now, with that being said, he was thrown into a pit and left there, as we do have later on into the morning, with Midoriya waking up, sometime around the afternoon. Someone yelling at him to wake up, and basically pulling him out of the pit, as they inform him that they're leaving now, and they're taking him with them. They've already packed up their base, and they are now leaving, giving Midoriya some heavy restraints and throwing him into the back of a wagon. Now, as Midoriya basically sits there, with his hands over his head, attached to a metal bar, he is at least happy that he's out of that stupid, dark place. It was also pretty cold, as the band does leave. Now, with that, they travel for a few hours, and Midoriya, he is looking around. There is a man with a sword and a few knives right across from him, keeping a direct eye on him. So, escape's going to be nearly impossible. And then there's him looking up to see exactly how tall the pole is, looking to see that if he could at least stand up and get on his feet, then he can slide his hands over that and try to make a run for it. Okay. That's a possibility. But if I try to make a run for it, someone on horseback can just catch me. And then there's Midoriya shifting his body for a second. The man getting on guard and almost drawing his sword. Midoriya feeling his ribs move around, as he somewhat winces in pain, thinking about how he should really get that checked out, or at least find a way to fix that. Damn it. Okay. If I'm able to get away, that could work. So, let's see now. I got it. Midoriya, at least leaning backwards a bit more, and slumping his feet across from him. At least being able to make himself a bit more comfortable, as he actually does at least move his head down to lay down. The man just staring at Midoriya, as he quickly begins to look around the wagon. And he does at least begin to start closing his eyes, so the man takes his eyes away from him possibly, pretending to be asleep for a few minutes. Now, the man himself finally does eventually leave, after at least trying to poke and prod Midoriya, and Midoriya not responding. After he successfully feigns or pretends to be asleep, the man does go back up front and sit down with the man, who is currently driving the wagon, talking to him for a minute. While Midoriya, he actually does look around a bit, opening his eyes and trying to see what of their supplies he might be able to use here. Now, Midoriya, he also does at least look over the side. He doesn't think anyone can see him right now. So let's see. That's food, it's a barrel. No, that might not work. Now, Midoriya does eventually see something that might be shiny. Okay, let's see. Midoriya slipping off his shoe and slowly moving his body that way, trying to grab it with his toes. Eventually he's able to and pull it out. Him finding what appears to be an old sword. That's rusty and somewhat dull. Now, after Midoriya does successfully pull it over to him, he begins to start trying to stand up, getting his feet underneath him and slowly moving upwards. As he also does finally stand up and is able to pull his hands up high. However, he has to grab the chain and move it up higher, stretching himself out and hurting his ribs more. As he's able to finally get free. And he does pick up the sword. Okay, let's see. I got it. If I can't run, I might as well just try and take the wagon. That might work. Now, Midoriya does try and look around a bit more. And he can't find it. Shit, he thought the shackles to these keys would be back here. Apparently not. Might as well. Now, with that being said, Midoriya, he begins to slowly move up to the front. And the man and him that were having a conversation, they are too distracted. Midoriya shoving the blade that he has straight through the back of the man's chest, and quickly going to reach for his own, grabbing a knife that he had and pulling it from his holster. As the man who carries the horse reins goes to try and set them down, Midoriya is able to quickly turn and stab the knife directly up into the man's jugular, as he feels it go upwards and pop his chin out of place. Before Midoriya grabs the reins and quickly pulls off to the left, as the wagon moves that direction. Midoriya quickly trying to pat down the man and see if he had the keys, before turning and grabbing the man who's about to fall off the wagon. Grabbing his body and quickly looking around, finding the keys and grabbing his sword, before he finally does undo these shackles. The moment that he does, he's able to undo the one on his right arm, and he quickly begins to try and head off. People quickly got suspicious, and one horse tried to follow them. Midoriya, him quickly just trying to rush the horses, hya, trying to move as fast as he possibly can to get away. However, after a body fell off the wagon, someone screamed and yelled out that there was an attack, or that there was a bandit, and some of the forces tried to quickly follow. Midoriya, quite simply, grabbing the knives from the man, who is still left on the cart, and getting ready soon. As soon as someone does come up and see that it's Midoriya, he quickly turns and throws the knife with his right hand, and it shoots outwards and stabs the person directly in the arm, as they go to try and draw their sword and jump onto the cart. The very moment that they do, Midoriya is able to bring up the sword holster and try and hit the person. As soon as they go to defend, Midoriya quite simply does one thing. He throws the shackles directly onto the person's leg, before the person does try and go down to stab down at Midoriya's hand. Midoriya quickly grabbing the shackle and pulling as hard as he can, the person falling on their ass as Midoriya kicks them off the wagon. And he can hear the wagon ride over something. Now, as it does happen, more people begin to try and pursue Midoriya. And eventually, he is caught up to by a large number of people. Midoriya quite simply resorting to throwing things off the wagon, some of the supplies. And eventually someone does jump onto the wagon once again. This time they draw their sword and try and fight with Midoriya. Midoriya quickly just doing one thing. As he turns around, he sees them. Him grabbing onto his sword and jumping forwards into the horses. As he goes to bring the sword down and stab into something, bringing it back up and stabbing down once more. As the thing finally goes undone, it falls onto the ground, and both the horses start to run off. The carriage almost flipping over forwards, as Midoriya rides off with his horse. People more concerned about the supplies, as the prisoner got away. Now, eventually Midoriya, he just started riding. However, he reopened his wounds, exerting himself so much. Eventually Midoriya just held onto the horse's mane and lost consciousness, as he did wake up a few, well, let's say a day and a half later, and he was in a bed, quite surprised as to where he was, as somebody walked into the room with a bowl of water, instructing him that he should not get up. He is very sick. Huh? Where am I? Don't worry about that right now. But just listen. You were an awful mess when we found you, young man. Are you alright? I'm fine. Where's my sword? Oh, your equipment and clothing. We had to get you out of those dirty old rags. And, well, your sword, her pointing to her left, by the door, saying that it's quite a weird sword, and that it's quite big for him, isn't it? Don't worry about that. Just let me up. Midoriya trying to sit up. However, with a high fever and his injuries, he can hardly move. The person trying to push Midoriya back down into the bed, telling him that he's in bad shape. However, Midoriya, he's finally able to get his foot or his feet under him, as he does stand up. And he almost falls forwards onto his hands and knees, talking about how he has to get back to the others. Now, with that, this lady is simply just telling him, others? What others? He was alone. Listen, ma'am, or lady, whatever your name is. I was taken captive. My family, they're probably still looking for me. Now, with that being said, Midoriya, he's able to get back on that horse after taking his equipment. Now, with that being said, Izuku, he would head out, heading back the way he somewhat remembers. He remembered to try and at least keep an eye on the way they were heading, in the direction. So he would head somewhat backwards, at least trying to retrace his steps. Eventually, after 7 hours, he would finally get there. And he would be looking around. Him making his way through the streets, and passing by building to building. At least making sure to keep his sword in his hand. And trying to make contact with anyone he can find. Now, eventually he does come upon a camp. and he does ask a few questions about his his mercenary group, saying the name of them and someone explaining to him that they actually head down in that direction, roughly about 4 hours ago. Midoriya actually turning and going to make his way that way. As some more time would pass, and Midoriya, he finally does arrive later on into the night. Him actually finding a campfires, and him putting the horse, well, I wouldn't say stabling the horse, but basically at least putting the horse on something he can, and then trying to walk up and talk with everyone. Midoriya has been traveling for a very long time today, and he tries to talk with certain people. As soon as it's heard that Midoriya is back, people are rushing to go and greet him, and just surprised that he is alive. Now, with that being said, a lot of them do see Midoriya's current injuries. And Midoriya is talking about how he heard that they were over here. Someone told him about that. As he does go to move forwards, before someone finally does at least shout something, to get the hell away from that kid. This being where Midoriya does watch as Gambino comes walking up. Him pointing out that that kid should have died, and that somebody with a cork attacked him, or somebody with that magical power. The diseased attacked Midoriya. They got too close to him. Gambino shouting and ranting that Midoriya, he is sick, and that he's going to get that ability. He's going to get something. People beginning to back away from him. Midoriya, actually, somewhat scared now. Gambino spouting off that he knew he should have abandoned him, as he draws his sword, saying that he had the thought to just go after him. But look at this. Look at you. Look at your injuries. Spouting off that the boy should have died. And that he wasn't even worried about him at all. Now, Gambino tells Midoriya that if he wants to simply be here, he needs to know one thing. If he is here, then he's a liability. If he has a magic ability, then no one around him is ever going to want to be his friend. Spouting off more and more, and rambling. Midoriya talking about how he's not sick. He's not sick. And Gambino, tired of it, going to rush Midoriya with a sword. Now, Midoriya simply does draw his own, and he's able to actually hit Gambino's sword right as it makes contact. Midoriya being knocked over and trying to at least get back up. As the bandages on his back, they begin to start bleeding again. And somebody does actually watch as blood begins to pour through Midoriya's shirt. And he does get back up. Bring his sword back up as somebody says that he's possessed by a demon. Look at that. As blood begins to pour down Midoriya's back, and, well, covering his clothing. Gambino talking about how he knew the kid was a bad omen from the very start. And now look at this. As Midoriya tries to talk with Gambino, try and reason with him. Him going to attack Midoriya. Now, with that being said, Midoriya just tries to defend, using his sword and trying to dodge out of the way. Gambino shouting at him that he simply needs to fight. Otherwise, he is going to kill him. And he should know how mercenaries work. Now, with that, Midoriya does actually get into somewhat of a firm stance. And he has his sword up. Gambino, he rushes forwards. And him and Midoriya do clash swords. Midoriya being able to block by bringing his sword up to his right and turning it at a 90-degree angle, before having to throw his sword down by his leg. and then bringing it back up to try and guard against his chest. Gambino, him, then at least tossing out his fist, and hitting Midoriya. Before Midoriya, he does actually go to punch down at Gambino's wrist, punching him as he actually does have his sword fall out of his hand. As soon as he does actually do that with his other hand, he pulls a knife, swiftly stabbing it up into Midoriya's side. To which Midoriya does somewhat scream out in pain, and looking into Gambino's eyes. He intends to kill him. And Midoriya gets angry, as he throws his fist directly up into Gambino's face. And Gambino, he does actually reach out to try and grab Midoriya, grabbing him by his shirt and pulling him in to hit him directly in the head. As that happens, Midoriya does actually throw up his hands, and grab Gambino by his knife. Him just holding on to it, as he puts his hands directly up Gambino's nose and tries to pull. Gambino screaming out in pain, as he goes to bring up both of his hands to grab Midoriya, who, without realizing it, still has the knife in his hand, pulling it out of his side and feeling a lot of pain. However, his adrenaline is way too high, and he goes out to try and hit Gambino in the windpipe. However, he accidentally stabs him, and he watches as the blade goes through Gambino's throat and out the back of his neck. As Gambino, he actually does have his eyes stare directly down at Midoriya, who begins to just back up. Everyone watching as Gambino bleeds out and dies. As somebody, they just do stare at Midoriya. And Midoriya watches, looking down at the scene he just caused. Him going to take a few steps forward to try and at least make sure he's alright, he's alive. However, somebody fires something. And as soon as Midoriya did actually begin to bend down, he was immediately hit, being shot with an arrow directly in his arm. And he just looked up, watching as the person quickly tried reloading. Everyone else running and going for their weapons. Midoriya grabbing his sword and running back over to the horse, as he gets on it, and quickly begins to try and run. Everyone he's ever just known is hunting him down, and they're chasing him. Midoriya just trying to get away, and stay alive, as he quickly just starts writing over and over, trying to leave. He needs to get out of here now. And Gambino, that man, his dad, him and that woman who raised him, they're both dead. This can't be real. This cannot be happening. No, no, no. No, that man cannot be right. Gambino wouldn't do that. That's all just a trick. That's all it is. It's just a trick. It's just a trick. This isn't funny. Midoriya begins to just panic, and have no rational thought go through his head. And he cannot remember how much time passed. But eventually the horse is finally just exhausted. And Midoriya, he just watches as the horse collapse. And it actually has pinned one of his legs. Midoriya is screaming out in pain as he just tries to kick the horse's back and get it off his leg. As he's finally able to pull it out, and he just starts to run off. Now, as soon as that does actually happen, Midoriya tries to run across a river, while everyone else is catching up. As soon as that does happen, Midoriya, he gets pulled away by the strong current, and he does try and swim against it. However, he does feel himself hit against something, and he does feel that arrow get driven deeper into his arm. Now, after that all happens, Midoriya just tries to get away from the river, and eventually he does wash up somewhere downstream, as he just lays there after pulling himself out of the river. His feet are still in the water, but he's cold, tired, and exhausted, as he does just look up towards the sky, and look at the moon. Where is he going now? What is his purpose? Now, with that being said, I do hope you guys enjoyed, and have an amazing night. I'll catch you guys in the next part.